As data centers continue to flock to Wisconsin, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle agree protecting Wisconsinites from substantially increased utility rates is a key priority. Our Wisconsin State Capitol Bureau Chief Vanessa Kelson breaks down the latest for regulations in the state.
Wisconsin lawmakers failed to come to consensus and didn't pass any bills regulating data centers last session. Now the conversation continues as some Democrats propose home renovations as a way to offset energy costs.
Wisconsin homeowners and residents should not be fronting the bill for big tech.
Democratic State Representative Supreme Moore Omakunde highlighted a new study from Green Homeowners United. The study says upgrading the energy efficiency of nearly 40,000 Wisconsin homes would offset the demand of a 200-megawatt data center, about the size of Meta's Beaver Dam data center.
It is imperative that we do everything that we can to shield ratepayers from these absurd rate hikes.
The renovations would include construction like adding insulation to homes' basement walls and attics, replacing electric water heaters with new tech, and sealing air leaks. Green Homeowners United says it's a quick solution that data centers could pay for.
It would take years to create a new power plant. We can insulate someone's house next week.
But Republican State Representative David Steffens says while conservation is admirable, these kinds of projects just won't cut it for keeping up with energy demands.
There isn't enough savings there, sadly, in the energy system to make the difference to address the seismic increase, the exponential increase we are going to be seeing from data centers.
Instead, Steffens advocates for nuclear energy.
We need to have clean water, air, land, but in order to handle the data center load, we're going to need base load, large-scale energy increases.
Both Democrats and Republicans agree we can expect to see some legislation regulating data centers next session. From the Wisconsin State Capitol, Vanessa Kelson.